The conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Zionists, now Israeli, is a modern phenomenon dating to the end of the 19th century, although the two groups have a different religions. Palestinians include Muslims, Christians, and Druze, while the religious differences are not the cause of the strife. The conflict began as a struggle over land. From the end of World War I until 1948, the area that both groups claimed was known internationally as a Palestine. Palestinian Arabs' claims to the land are based on their continuous residence in the country for hundreds of years and the fact that they represented the demographic majority until 1948. They rejected the notion that the biblical area kingdom constitute the basis of a valid modern claim. Most Palestinians view the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as their future state, and most Israelis agree. The negotiation parties have been the Israeli government and the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The United States has been an ardent supporter of Israel, often taking position against UN resolution condemning the action of Israel. Since 2006, the Palestinian side has been fractured by a conflict between two major factions, Fatah, the largest party, and Hamas. As a result, the territory controlled by the Palestinian National Authority, the Palestinian interim government, is a split between Fatah and the West Bank, and Hamas is the Gaza Strip. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by Israeli and the United States, although it won the Palestinian election of 2006. Therefore, it has not been allowed to participate in official negotiation. The background of this issue is the 19th century. Following a trend that emerged earlier in Europe, people around the world began to identify themselves as a nation and to demand national rights, foremost the right to self-rule in a state of their own, self-determination and a sovereignty. Jewish and the Palestinian both started to develop a national consciousness and mobilized to achieve a national goals. Because Jews were spread across the world in diaspora, the Jewish national movement as a Zionist trend sought to identify a place where Jews could come together through the process of immigration and a settlement. Palestine seemed the logical and the optimal place because it was the site of a Jewish origin. The Zionist movement began in 1888 by the Herzl, with the first wave of European Jewish immigration to Palestine. At that time, the land of Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. The cause of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the firstly is the partition of a plan in 1947. By 1947, Jews comprised 37% of a Palestinian population, while Arabs comprised nearly 63% in 1945. The Zionist leadership in Palestine launched a violent revolt against a British rule. Pressed by this revolt, Britain decided to withdraw from Palestine in 1947 and threw the problem into the lap of the new United Nations. The UN devised a partition plan that divided Palestine into two states, a Jewish state on 55% of Palestine and an Arab state on 42, and three forming an international zone including Jerusalem. Both states lack defensively border. The Zionists accepted the plan, although the Zionist leader did not accept as final the border it laid down for Israel. 1948 war. Fighting between Jews and Palestinians erupted in Palestinian right after the UN partition plan was approved on November 20, 1947. The Arab states neighboring Palestine, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq and Lebanon attacked Israel promptly on its declaration of a statehood on 15 May 1948. Arab motives were mixed. Jordan sought only to annex the Palestinian state. Egypt sought to destroy Israel and to forestall Jordan's move. Israel won a decisive military victory by early 1949. The Six Day War. The Six Day War was fought between 5 to 10 June 1967 with Israel emerging victorious and effectively seizing control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the West Bank and the East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. The UN Security Council adopted Resolution 242, the Land for Peace formula, which called for Israeli withdrawal from territories occupied in 1967 and the termination of all claims or states' belligerency. Resolution 242 recognized the right of every state in the area to live in peace within a secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. The 1973 war. In October 1973, war broke out again between Israel and Egypt in the Sinai on the Syria in the Golan Heights. A ceasefire was achieved, UN Resolution 339 and a UN peacekeepers deployed on both the fronts, only withdrawing from the Egyptian front after Israel-Egypt concluded a peace treaty in 1979. UN peacekeepers remained deployed in the Golan Heights. The Jerusalem. The three largest Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, claim Jerusalem. In their religious and historical narratives, Israel asserts that the city should not be divided and should remain conflicted within Israeli political control. Palestinians claim at least a part of the city which were not a part of Israel prior to June 1967 as after 2005. There are 4,65,000 Jews mostly living in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and there are 2,32,000 Muslims mostly living in this East Jerusalem. The water issue. Immediately following its occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, Israel took over control of almost all the share or transboundary water resources, including the underground mountain aquifer, comprising the eastern, northeastern, and western basins and the Jordan River, both started on June 4, 1967. There is a lot of process to help to end the conflict of Israeli and Palestine. There are a lot of a peace process between Palestine and Israel, but all the process are not end, and at the end the war has been begun. The peace process is the firstly the Camp David Accord in 1978. There were several peace plans in 1967 war, but nothing happened until after the 1973 Yom Kippur or October War. There were followed a new mode for peace, as shown by a historic visit to Jerusalem by the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in November 1977. Secondly, the Madrid Conference in 1991. This conference, co-sponsored by the US and the Soviet Union, was designed to follow up the Egypt-Israel treaty by encouraging other Arab countries to sign their own agreement with Israel. The third one is Oslo Agreement. The Oslo Agreement tried to tackle the missing element of all previous talk or direct agreement between Israeli and Palestinians. Represented by the PLO, its importance was there was finally mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO. The Camp David 2000 various attempts were made, including at Taba in 1995, Wave River in 1998, and Sharm el Sheikh in 1999, to speed up the withdrawal and self government provision of Oslo. Then in 2000, President Bill Clinton sought to address the final status issues, including border Jerusalem and the refugees that Oslo had left aside for a later negotiation. The Taba. Although he was about to leave office, Bill Clinton refused to give up and present a bridging proposal which set up a further talks in Washington and Cairo, and then Taba in Egypt. These talks were not at the top level, but differences were narrowed. Without being overcome, there was a more flexibility on a territory, and it was reported by EU observed that Israeli negotiators accepted the concept of a Jerusalem being the capital of a Palestinian state. The solution of a two-state between Israeli and Palestine, that the two-state solution calls for the creation of an independent Palestinian state existing peacefully alongside Israel. That goal has been embraced by a past Democratic and Republican administration and the United Nations. Scholars say that the two-state solution would end hostility between Israel and Palestinian as well as Arab neighbors and produce stability in the chaos-prone Middle East. Getting there, however, has proved exceedingly difficult because of what appear to be a several intractable disputes. Foremost in Israel demand that the Palestinians and the Arab neighbors recognize the Jewish state's right to exist and end terror attack. In addition, the two sets are far apart on the borders of a new Palestinian state. Both claim Jerusalem as their capital, and Israel has expanded settlements on land that the Palestinians also say is theirs. One-state solution. The one-state solution has gained support for late amid to failure of a progress toward creation of the independent Palestinian nation. This approach calls for Israel to annex the West Bank, which is captured from Jordan and their 1967 war. When grants some form of citizenship into Palestinian, the idea has appealed to small factions of both Israeli and Palestinian, frustrated by the current standoff and a perpetual hostility. Among the many problems are the likely disapproval from the approach by most of the world community and whether Palestinian would be affordable full citizens' rights and eventually outnumber Jewish Israeli or be consigned to second-class status as occurred in South Africa during apartheid.